There's a huge common problem that I see and something that almost everyone is overlooking when it comes to doing rotator cuff exercises for shoulder health and shoulder pain. The common issue I see with the fitness and rehab industry is that they're so fixated on muscles, and muscles being the things that help people feel better and move better. But that's not necessarily always the case. Muscles are very important, but they can only work as well and through a range of motion that our joints allow them to. If I'm doing rotator cuff exercises on a shoulder that doesn't have much mobility, then I'm only likely going to be using my rotator cuff in rotator cuff exercises in a given range of motion before I'm out of mobility, and then I have to start using compensatory strategies that probably don't involve using my rotator cuff properly. Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. What's a very common rotator cuff exercise? It's holding the arm down by the side, having a band in the hand, and doing an external rotation like this. Well, what if you didn't have the genuine external rotation space to do that exercise through a full range of motion? Well, what you're probably going to end up doing is getting to your end range of motion and then doing something else to help you get further. And what that's probably going to be is extending your low back. You can try this right now. Put your arm down by your side and then try to go out, and notice when you hit that first little point of resistance. At that point, you are very closely approaching your end range of motion. And for you to get any further out, you're gonna have to activate something in your shoulder or back to get further. This is what I'm talking about. So if you don't have the genuine space to do these rotator cuff exercises, they're not gonna be very helpful. You may be asking then, well, what is the thing that helps me improve my range of motion? That thing is improving the relationship between your rib cage and your scapula. You see, our shoulder and the mobility, let's take that external rotation again, involves a degree of the scapula actually moving on the rib cage. We have to start at the foundation, and the foundation is the rib cage. And that is because we need to have it sit on a thoracic spine that has a little bit of convexity to it. So it has this relationship where it can glide like this, but if you have too straight of a thoracic spine or too flexed, then you lose the ability for it to properly glide. So we have to be able to get the rib cage in a position where that's possible. If you have too flexed or too extended of a thoracic spine, then you probably have muscles somewhere on the front or back side or both sides of the rib cage that are restricting the ability for the scapula to move on top of that. So let me show you a way that you can test where the restrictions are on your rib cage. The first test I want you to take is shoulder external rotation, but we're going to take it two different ways. The first one is up with the elbow parallel with the shoulder right here, laying on our back. And we're just going to let that arm and elbow rotate back like this, keeping the elbow in the same place, stopping at the point where we hit resistance that we have to push through. The second test we're going to do is shoulder external rotation, but we're going to be down by our side as we do this because we need to be able to get to a full 90 degrees before we feel like our elbow moves away from us or our back extends. These two shoulder external rotation tests are testing for slightly different areas of restriction on our back rib cage. Shoulder external rotation up here is testing for restrictions, particularly at the lower level of your scapula right here. Shoulder external rotation down by your side is more of the higher area right here. So if you're limited in both, you have tightness probably all through the area of your scapula. But just one or the other can tell you where you're limited more overall, and I'm going to give you exercises that can help improve these things. The other test is shoulder internal rotation. Again, you're going to be on your back, your elbow is going to be directly out from your shoulder, and without letting your shoulder pop forward or squeezing your shoulder blade back, just let it hang out and then drop that forearm until you feel like you can't go any further without your shoulder rolling forward. Around 70 degrees is ideal here, and if you can't get to that, this being 0 degrees, then that is probably a restriction of the front side of your rib cage around the sternal area. And if that's the case, then you probably have muscles on the front side of your rib cage that are restricting that. If you like this type of approach, check out my shoulder health program. This takes people from easier exercises that help reposition the rib cage and shoulder as a whole and progresses them through mobility and strengthening exercises to help get full dynamic capabilities of the shoulder back, and addresses so many common issues we see at the rib cage, at the scapula, and at the humerus itself. Check it out down below in the description. I'll link it there. Now, the thing is I could sit here and give you exercises that help stretch these areas out, but that's not gonna be as good as educating our body how to expand this 20,000 times a day with our breath. That's gonna be so much better than just holding a stretch for a couple of minutes. We can stretch, but what is that gonna educate our body to do? What is that gonna teach our body to, how is that gonna teach our body to actually create space and do it over and over again? The breath is the best tool for this. So we need to be able to breathe properly through these exercises. Please make sure that you're doing that as I coach the breathing in these videos you're about to see. Make sure that you get that on point, because if that's not right, then none of this other stuff is gonna work. So the way that we breathe properly is to make sure that we're tall and our pelvis is underneath us, so we're not extended or flexed too much. And all we're gonna do is just exhale softly through our mouth for about 5 to 8 seconds. At the end of that, we should feel a little bit of our side abs engage. You're gonna maintain that slight side ab tension as you inhale softly through your nose without engaging your neck. So it should be a silent inhale. And you should feel your rib cage expand in front to back, and also somewhat on the sides up near your armpits a little bit as well. This is proper expansion of the rib cage. Your belly rises slightly simultaneously along with expansion 360 degrees of your rib cage. So if you were limited in shoulder external rotation up here, here's an exercise that can help improve that.
We're gonna get in this seated position, obviously, but we have a step underneath Trevor because that's what's allowing him to keep his whole foot flat, but still get around a 90-degree bend at both his knees and his hips. So if your chair allows you to do that, great, stick with it. But regardless, you need to be able to feel your sit bones on both sides throughout the duration of this exercise. So those little bony protrusions in each butt cheek, make sure you're feeling relatively even contact with those while you go through this. We're gonna take that pillow, fold it in half so it's about that thick, which is what you want, and we're gonna wedge it in between our lowest ribs and the top of our thighs right there. And now what we're gonna do is take our arms over them, and we're going to get in this position where we have a bent elbow, palms facing us, and now we're gonna reach and protract forward. So we are going to bend forward a little bit, and that's okay because the goal of this exercise is to open up our backs. So holding that position right there, keeping your whole foot flat on both sides, feeling your sit bones a bit, we're going to exhale through our mouth. Nice and soft and long. And at the end of that exhale, sighing it out, we're gonna feel a little bit of side abs engage. And you're gonna slightly maintain that. The pillow is there to help you do that. And then softly and silently inhale through your nose for about 5 seconds, 3 to 5 seconds, depending on how comfortable you can be. And then exhale again. Keep working through that for about 5 breaths. Some things to keep in mind here is that we want our head to be in a neutral position. So it shouldn't be shoved far forward or retreated back. We want it to be that we're looking somewhat in between our hands straight ahead right there. And that will ensure we're in a pretty good neck position. And the other thing is that people, despite this being a flexion-based exercise, will want to sit up when they inhale. That's you trying to breathe into your belly and extend. So we're trying to get your back to relax. We're trying to open up your ribs in the back. So maintain that posture right there. It's actually a little bit better to be a little bit more slouched than extended. We can do other drills to open up your front ribs, but the purpose of this is to open up your back ribs. A couple of modifications if necessary. If that amount of flexion and rounding is uncomfortable for you for some reason, you can add a little step, whatever works for you, maybe some books, I don't know, find something in your house that works well, and then stack it underneath that pillow right there. And now you can still get a little bit of that protraction, feel your sit bones, do everything the same. For other people, they may not feel enough posterior expansion without getting a little bit more flexion added in. So what you could do there is simply just keep your elbows in the same place, but reach them further and push your ribs back more, go into more flexion. And for other people, that will be what they need to get that expansion of their back and relaxation of those back extensor muscles. The most common mistake on this exercise is people are gonna overdo the reach and really force it because they really wanna expand their back. Really, that's gonna cause more problems than anything else. You're just gonna compress yourself more. So 3 out of 10 intensity of a gentle, soft reach right there. And you can maintain that as you inhale. That's all you need to get the expansion we're looking for.
If you were limited in shoulder external rotation down here, here's an exercise that can improve that.
The easiest progression of this would be to just wrap our hands around the back of our hamstrings right there, and then keeping our back in a flexed position, we're going to try to find a rhythm to this roll. So inhale back, exhale up. Inhale back through the nose, exhale up through the mouth. Now, you want to find a position and distance to go where it's comfortable and you don't feel like you're using much muscular tension to push yourself into the position or pull yourself into the position. So experiment with it and see what works best for you. But something rhythmic and in a consistent range of motion like this would be good.
And if you are limited in shoulder internal rotation, this is my recommendation for you.
What we're going to do here is get in a door frame, or we can use a squat rack, whatever works, so that way we can hook our fingers completely around something nice and comfortably. So usually one of those two things is going to be best here. We're going to start in a parallel stance, hip width apart with the toes straight ahead, and we need to make sure that we get a thumbs down grip, perfectly shoulder level. So not too high, not too low. Straight out from our shoulder, nice and relaxed straight arm. What we're going to do now is take a slight step back with the right leg, just so the toes are in line with the heel on the front foot, and we're going to stay heavy on the left foot. Now, we're going to round our back, flex our back. The lat extends our back, so we want to create length by rounding the entire back, even the low back. Do a little posterior pelvic tilt. Okay, now, this is the most important thing, and this is where most people are going to screw it up. Keeping that rounded back, just subtly turn into it, just a little bit, and drop this left shoulder. Right there is all you need, all you need. And then you're gonna feel a nice, but not overly intense stretch on that lat. And now you're gonna exhale through your mouth. Nice, long, sighing exhale, not but for 5 to 10 seconds. And you're gonna feel those left side abs engage, or the opposite side of the side you're stretching, because this side is more closed off now. Maintain that slight side ab engagement at the end of that exhale, and then close your mouth, inhale through your nose, and feel this stretch out even more. 5-second silent inhale. So we're not trying to go really hard, we're just trying to ease our way into this. So again, very moderate lat stretch, little bit of a turn, keeping the back rounded the whole time. Exhale nice and long for 5 to 10 seconds until you feel your side abs on the opposite side. Hold that. Inhale through your nose silently. I should not hear you inhale, but I should hear you exhale. The most common mistake on this by far, as I touched on, is people are going to crank into this and turn way too hard. This is not an aggressive stretch. We want it to be nice and subtle. We want this to be a relaxed position we can get into. So make sure your grip is relaxed. You're just very subtly turning into it, keeping your back rounded. It's much less than you probably think you need to. If you feel a giant stretch, that's great, but chances are you're actually not in the position you want in your low back and upper back. You want it to be about a 5 out of 10 stretch, nice and subtle.
Now, make sure you're doing these exercises in your genuine range of motion, even if it's not full. So if, for example, you took your external rotation from 40 degrees to 70 degrees, then make sure you're stopping these rotator cuff exercises at 70 degrees. More than that, you're just going to promote a compensatory strategy.